In the centre of London today, in the heart of the iconic shopping street of Oxford Street, is a small monument and discreet nod to a dark past and part of London's history. There are 3 trees which mark the site of the Tyburn Tree, a place where over the centuries there was a huge amount of execution. These 3 oak trees are meant to symbolise the triangular gallows that once stood there. This part of London today might be a modern metropolis filled with tourists and people going about their daily business shopping, but in the past it was a place of execution, bloodshed, and some of the most barbaric deaths imaginable. Tyburn was a place where people were specifically hanged, drawn and quartered, and it was here where thousands of people were killed over the centuries, becoming victims of executioners. But why was the Tyburn Tree so barbaric, and is it one of the most brutal execution methods in history? Welcome to the Fortress. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Executions throughout the centuries took place all over Europe, but Tyburn became a place which gained a notorious reputation. It was the original junction of a Roman road, and was seen as a place where people would pass by bodies, which would send a clear message to people to behave themselves and stay in line. The first recorded execution at Tyburn near to a stream occurred in 1196, as William Fitzosbert, a rebel leader, was hanged after being dragged naked behind a horse to Tyburn. But in the centuries after, it became a place synonymous with executions, and Henry VIII would also use Tyburn to execute dozens of rebels. There were many execution methods deployed at Tyburn. As mentioned, the harrowing hanged, drawn and quartered, which is often said to have been one of the most brutal execution methods used in history, was performed at Tyburn, as was burning at the stake, which was also performed upon heretics or religious criminals. But the most common method of execution was hanging. Usually with executions, the last day of the condemned was marked by a religious event or day of importance. Every Sunday before the executions, a sermon was preached nearby at a chapel in Newgate, and those who were not connected with the execution could attend. On the night before the execution, the sexton of St Sepulchre Church recited religious verses outside the walls where the condemned were, and then the condemned the next morning heard prayers and received the sacrament if they wanted to. On the day of the execution, they were then taken to the Tyburn Gallows from Newgate Prison in a horse-drawn open cart. They were paraded 3 miles from Newgate to Tyburn, and the streets were usually lined with people who saw the procession of the dead. The cart usually rested at the Bowl Inn pub in St Giles, where the condemned was allowed a final drink of alcohol, of either a strong liqueur, strong ale, or a glass of wine. But then the cart continued to Tyburn, and when it got there, the condemned would be taken up onto the scaffold in front of almost a huge carnival-like celebration and gathering. There were huge stands erected for people to see the execution, and people were hanging out of windows, wishing to get a glimpse of today's proceedings. The wealthy even paid for the best seats, and before the execution, the condemned was allowed to say a few final words. In this they usually admitted their guilt, and absolved others of their guilt and possible fate, and the authorities also wanted them to apologise for their crimes to God. But when the normal gallows stood at Tyburn, the cart would be led up to the gallows, and the condemned was then stood on the cart before the executioner secured the noose around their neck. The cart was then driven away, and the condemned would be left hanging, and it was death by slow strangulation. There was no drop, just a twitching and struggling body of someone fighting for their life. Sometimes, if an ordeal for a criminal was to be made much more severe, then the victim would be cut down and hanged many times before they then died, and this also happened with hanging, drawing and quartering, as the victim was cut down before they died. But Tyburn is mostly remembered in this way for the fact the Tyburn Tree stood there, a triangular gallows which was made for the sole purpose of being able to hang more people at once. The Tyburn Tree had 3 legs or beams which were joined up to create a triangular structure, where people could be hanged on the different sides. This was a huge structure too, and gave everyone a good view of the proceedings. Mass execution was performed often, and during one of these on the 23rd of June 1649, there were 23 men and 1 woman hanged at the same time, and they were taken to the tree on 8 carts. Following executions on the tree, there would usually be fights breaking out between the family of the condemned and anatomists, who wanted to carry out dissections of the executed, as they were allowed to seize the bodies legally. The first person to be executed on the Tyburn Tree was a Roman Catholic named John Story, and the tree was created during the reign of Elizabeth I, a time of great religious intolerance. There were many Catholics who were executed on the tree during her reign. One of the strangest executions to be carried out on the Tyburn Tree did not even include the hanging of a living person. Following the restoration of the monarchy and during the reign of Charles II, the new king wanted to punish those men who had signed his father's death warrant and were the true powers behind the execution of King Charles I. With this, Oliver Cromwell, the former Lord Protector, Henry Ireton, Cromwell's son-in-law, and Judge John Bradshaw were all dug up from their burial sites as they had died in the years before, and these coffins were cracked open and the remains were then paraded throughout London. They were taken to the Tyburn Tree, where they were then hanged in chains, and their heads were even then hacked off their decaying corpse, with the heads then placed on spikes, and the bodies thrown into the pit, with many other body parts. The Tyburn Tree was replaced and mended a number of times throughout the centuries, because of the sheer amount of people who were being executed upon it. During the execution of Catherine Noland, in June 1759, it was said that, when she came to Tyburn, all the crossbeams had been pulled down, so she was in fact tied up on the top of one of the upright posts and hung with her back to it. There were thousands of people who came out to see the hangings on the Tyburn Tree, and for many this even became a morbid business opportunity for them, as they sold food to the crowds and also programs containing information about who the condemned were, and people wanted to find out more about who they were watching hang. Because of the executions in this area, even phrases entered the English language, such as to dance a Tyburn jig, which was a euphemism for someone being hanged. The Tyburn Tree was last used on the 3rd of November 1783, when a highwayman named John Austin was hanged for his crimes in front of an absolutely huge and colossal crowd. But then these hangings were moved across to Newgate Prison to be performed there, as it was said to have been safer. But it would not be long before further public disorder and shocking behaviour led to executions being carried out within the prison, away from the eyes of the public. But today on the famous shopping street, a small plaque marks the site of the iconic triangular gallows where it stood, as do the 3 oak trees that were planted in a triangle on purpose. It was a harrowing place over the centuries, and over the years thousands of people were executed on the very spot where today millions of people pass by unaware of the past every single week. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.